They gnawed through stone and unleashed a war. Some fell. Others fought to the death. Welcome to the Rock. Alcatraz rises from a bare rock in the middle of San Francisco Bay, a small island that, in less than 30 years of operation, became a symbol of punishment with no return. This was the place where the system sent those it could no longer control: gangsters, career robbers, men who kept breaking rules and stirring riots. People the prisons on the mainland had grown tired of. The unwritten rule was simple: no one gets out. But attempts still happened. On April 27, 1936, inmate Joseph Bowers, number 210, was hauling trash across the yard, pushing a wheeled trash cart. The day looked ordinary. Then he suddenly let go of the cart and sprinted toward the fence. He ignored every warning. Somehow he climbed over the top strand of barbed wire, a desperate, reckless leap toward freedom. A single shot followed. Bowers slipped off the cliff and fell nearly 50 feet onto the wet rocks below. It was recorded as the first escape attempt in Alcatraz history, and it ended exactly the way the guards always promised. San Francisco lies only about 2 kilometers away. The city is visible from the island: streets, hills, bridges, almost close enough to touch. It creates the illusion that a man could simply dive in and swim to safety. But the bay has its own rules. The water is icy year-round. The current drags everything toward the open Pacific. Fog rolls in so thick that a swimmer can't see his own hands. The city may look close, but in reality, it's unreachable. The island itself is tiny, roughly half a kilometer long and less than 200 meters wide. At the top sits the heavy concrete prison building with a single entrance. Around it, barbed wire fencing, guard towers, floodlights. Beyond the perimeter, a sharp drop straight into cold gray water. At times, there were 3 armed guards for every 1 inmate. Alcatraz didn't hold ordinary criminals. It was a place for those who had exhausted the patience of every other warden: violent men, chronic troublemakers, escape risk convicts. Stories about the Rock spread quickly through the American criminal world. Tales of beatings, cold windowless cells, nights spent on bare concrete. Some prisoners injured themselves on purpose just to avoid going to the workshops. Suicides were part of the statistics. The administration never hid its intention. The very existence of Alcatraz was meant to scare. Cross the line and you'll go to the Rock, a threat that worked better than any reform program. The worst place on the island was the solitary block known as the Hole. Stone chambers with no windows, no furniture, and no clothing, just darkness and cold. And yet Alcatraz had a strange side. A few inmates actually asked to be transferred here. For reasons no one could fully explain, the food on the island was better than in most prisons across America. For some, that was enough. Even here, there were inmates with privileges. Al Capone served his time on the Rock. His cell had the same cold walls and iron bars as the others. But he received furniture: a bed, a chair, a desk. He played banjo in the prison band and quickly became its star. Other notorious figures passed through Alcatraz as well: Cohen, Shinn, Kelley, bank robbers, mobsters. The population hovered around 300. Fights, stabbings, and killings were common. The guards answered with equal brutality. And despite the island's reputation as a place no one escapes, Inmates kept searching for a way out. Many of the escape tricks familiar from movies, homemade tools, fake heads, improvised disguises, were first invented and tested on this very rock. In 1937, two inmates, Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe, were the first to notice a weakness in the system. Security inside the prison workshops was lighter than in the main cell blocks. They stole a set of metal files, cut through the window bars, and slipped outside. They had a primitive plan. I use inner tube rubber to soften the drop from the low cliff, then rely on fuel cans as flotation. A thick fog covered the island, hiding them from the guards on the towers, but the bay water that day was only 11 degrees Celsius. A current pushed them toward the ocean, and the fog erased all sense of direction. Their bodies were never recovered. Officially, both men are listed as drowned. The workshops were rebuilt afterward. A year later, 3 inmates chose brute force instead. They attacked guards, killing one with a hammer pry bar and seizing rifles. But they overlooked the obvious. The island held hundreds of armed officers. The escape collapsed within minutes. 2 inmates were shot dead. The third surrendered. In 1939, a better planned attempt came from Arthur Doc Barker, a well-known gangster, and 4 accomplices. They sawed through the cell bars, which turned out to be relics from the old military prison era, made of softer steel. With a homemade jack, they bent the outer window bars and reached the shoreline. They tried to gather wood for a raft, but a guard spotted them from a tower and opened fire. After that, every bar on the island was replaced with hardened steel. In 1941, an inmate tried something simpler, hiding in a trash container. He made it to the shoreline on a work truck, slipped into the water, and started swimming. 5 minutes later, the cold nearly shut down his body. He turned back and surrendered. In 1943, several inmates attacked and tied up 2 guards. While the prisoners worked on breaking through barriers, one of the bound guards managed to drag himself across the floor and blow his colleague's whistle. The alarm sounded. The escapees were already in the water, clinging to stolen barrels as makeshift floats. Guards opened fire. One fugitive hid in a small cave on the shoreline. He survived 3 days without food or warmth, and, completely exhausted, returned and surrendered himself to the guards. During World War II, the workshops produced uniforms for the U.S. Army. In 1945, one inmate stole a full sergeant's uniform, put it on, and casually walked to the ferry. He even boarded. He was caught only because he had no papers to show during the final check. But the most dramatic attempt erupted on May 20th, 1946. It would be remembered as the Battle of Alcatraz. The ringleaders were Bernard Coy and Joseph Cretzer, both hardened criminals. Coy was serving 25 years for bank robbery. Cretzer was listed by the FBI as a public enemy. Coy spent months observing guard routes. He noticed that the gun gallery was separated from the inmates only by a metal grate with wide gaps, wide enough, he believed, for a starved man to squeeze through. That day, 2 guards were on duty in the cell block, one unarmed, one armed. The unarmed officer was distracted and strangled. When the armed guard returned, Coy, who had been deliberately starving himself to narrow his frame, slipped through the bars and attacked him. He grabbed the guard's keys, rifle, and pistol. With those, McCoy's group captured several more officers and freed about a dozen inmates. Once the others heard the plan, most voluntarily returned to their cells. Even they understood it was a mad risk. The plan itself sounded simple: fight their way to the dock and seize a boat. But it fell apart instantly. They inserted the wrong key into the main door lock and jammed it completely. The alarm still hadn't been raised. But their small window of luck closed when a new shift of officers entered the block. The escapees captured them too. Now they had 8 hostages and a cache of weapons. The battle lasted 2 days. The inmates fought fiercely, knowing there was no way back. On the second day, U.S. Marines, fresh from the Battle of Okinawa, landed on the island. They pushed through with grenades and rifle fire. 5 people were killed, 14 wounded. 2 surviving ringleaders were later executed in the gas chamber. The third received another life sentence. After 1946, Alcatraz tightened security across every corner of the island. And until the legendary escape of 1962, nothing even close to this event ever happened again. In the history of Alcatraz, the most famous escape remains the one from 1962. It is often called the Anglin brothers' escape. 4 men took part in it. Brothers John Anglin and Clarence Anglin, their partner Frank Morris, and inmate Alan West. None of them were murderers. Morris had been involved in robberies and drugs. The Anglins specialized in theft and car stealing, and West was in for auto theft. But all 4 had been sent to prisons from which they tried to escape. And all 4 eventually ended up on the rock. The plan was conceived by Morris. He noticed that behind the concrete walls of the Block B cells were old ventilation shafts. The concrete was brittle, left over from the days when the island served as a military prison. Using a spoon, a melted coin, and a vacuum cleaner motor, the inmates made a homemade drill, crude but functional. Day after day, they gnawed away at the wall, little by little. They could work only for an hour, when music played over the loudspeakers and masked the sound. The holes were concealed with plugs made of papier-mâché from newspapers. West and Morris bartered with other inmates for rubberized raincoats and jackets. From these they sewed a raft. They made dummy bodies from newspapers and paste. And for fake heads they used real stolen hair from the prison barber shop. On the night of June 11th, 1962, what would later be called the most mysterious escape in Alcatraz history began. The fake heads were placed on the pillows, the bodies under the blankets. 3 men, the 2 Anglins and Morris, crawled into the ventilation shaft. West remained in his cell. Either he didn't have enough time, or he panicked. It was from him that the details of the plan later became known. The tunnel was narrow, about 1 meter wide. First they had to climb 10 meters up through it, get onto the roof, then descend down a drainage pipe. Reaching the water, they inflated the rubberized raft, using bellows made from a stolen accordion. Then they paddled into the dark bay. They were never seen again. The official version is simple and harsh. The escapees drowned. Later, John Anglin's wallet with photos of relatives was found on the shore, as well as a handmade life vest with a broken valve and pieces of rubberized material. For the FBI, this became proof that the sea had swallowed them. But then strange things began to appear. In 2011, The Channel National Geographic reported that a raft found many years earlier had been identified as theirs. It had washed into coastal reeds, and footprints led away from it. There was another testimony. On June 13, 1962, 3 unidentified men stopped a car on the shore of the San Francisco Bay, threw the driver out, and drove away. After the escape, the Anglin brothers' mother began receiving flowers, then postcards supposedly from South America. When she died in 1973, 2 strange women were seen at the funeral, resembling disguised men. In 2013, the FBI received a letter signed with the name of John Anglin. The author claimed that he had cancer and was ready to surrender in exchange for treatment and a year in prison. Experts declared the letter a forgery, but it reignited interest. And in 2020, the Irish outlet Irish Business Post reported a new twist. A facial recognition system identified 2 men from a 1975 photograph taken in Brazil with 97% certainty as John and Clarence Anglin. Today, the case remains unsolved. Alcatraz was closed in 1963, a year after the escape. Maintaining the prison had become too expensive. The concrete was crumbling from salt and water. What do you think? Did they manage to escape, or did they die during the attempt?